here in North Carolina. Right here. Right now. Right here. Right now. Right here. Right now. Love and justice has never lost.
It's been going on for weeks. Activists gathering at the North Carolina State House for Moral Mondays, a grassroots effort to influence the legislative agenda that has featured a number of faith leaders among the activists. There have been arrests, but there has also been a growing sense of citizen involvement in our system of government, something that the Founding Fathers would applaud. And so on this July 4th weekend, I'm very pleased to welcome the Reverend Dr. Jill Edens, who is co-pastor of the United Church of Chapel Hill. Welcome to State of Belief Radio, Reverend Edens.
Thank you for having me on.
When I looked at Moral Mondays, my first thought was, living in Washington, I wish we could get maybe just a morning. But you've got a whole day, so that's good. Start, please, by talking briefly about where Moral Mondays came from and what the issues are and how you personally got involved.
This has been organized by the North Carolina chapter of the NAACP and their leader, Reverend William Barber. And my understanding is that it got started in April, actually on Monday, Thursday, as the legislature was looking to restrict voting rights. And so they've been doing it since the end of April up till now, and it's certainly grown. It seems to me to be mainly a movement of people of faith. Certainly the early protesters and supporters were seem to me to be all people who are really active in their churches and synagogues and religious gatherings.
Are the faith leaders who are involved coming from a lot of different traditions, or mainly from Christianity and Judaism?
The rabbis in North Carolina, to my knowledge, have organized and sent a message to the governor and to the legislature, and they have been active, and I've seen them at the protests, and of course I know them well. But I've also been told that there are people from Muslim communities there. Certainly, probably the great majority of North Carolinians are Christians. There are Christians of every stripe. There was a statement that was sent out from the United Methodist Bishop, the Lutheran Bishop, the Catholic Bishop in North Carolina, and both dioceses of the Episcopal Church in support of Moral Monday and its concerns about the legislation that's being passed in North Carolina right now.
What seems to be the major issues that rise to the top?
I think for people of faith, they're quite concerned about the poor and the way in which they will suffer, especially through the activities of the General Assembly. So the 500,000 people who will not benefit with the expansion of Medicaid, which will be almost 100% paid for by the federal government, but the state has so far not agreed to be part of the Medicaid expansion. And now 70,000 North Carolinians will lose their unemployment benefits, again, 100% paid for by the federal government, but the state has decided not to extend those benefits any longer to North Carolinians. So these things, are not about balancing the budget or even any ideology that I can discern, but will really do grave injury to the most vulnerable North Carolinians. So when I talk to people in my church and other faith leaders, they're quite concerned about the poor in our state, the way they've been suffering through this recession, and now what little they have seems to be taken away. We're concerned about the budget and the way in which taxes will be raised on the poorest North Carolinians with increases in the sales tax, while the richest North Carolinians will benefit from tax cuts. So I think concern for the poor, concern about equal justice, the racial Justice Act was repealed by this legislature. We're very concerned about the state's attempt to restrict access to voting. So all the ways in which we would hope that the state's resources would be fairly distributed among all our citizens, we think that's under threat right now from this legislature.
Can you contextualize this participation in Moral Mondays a bit in the broad tradition of citizen activism? It seems to me this is something a little new.
I haven't seen this level of activity and energy in all my 34 years in ministry in North Carolina. My church has always had a great concern for the poor, and our people are active. But there's a real energy in North Carolina among people of faith, and a real cohesion among those of us who really come from very different traditions. So you could say the legislature has had a unifying effect on people of faith in North Carolina.
I know there are a good number of evangelical Christians in North Carolina. Are you getting any participation from people in some of the faith traditions that have not traditionally been a part of the social justice movement?
Yeah, the main line, for example. Although I think you would find that the signers of the one statement, the Roman Catholics, United Methodists, Presbyterians, Lutherans, and Episcopalians would certainly be solidly mainline, but some of them would be solidly moderate to conservative. So I'm very encouraged by the strength of that statement, but certainly it would be churches that you normally would think of as being active on social justice. But there are certainly, I'm not. It's growing. I mean, we had 3,000 people on the mall, so it would be interesting to see what the distribution of people, represents in those gatherings.
Jill, I know that you yourself have been arrested for your participation. Talk about that, please.
Yes, I became more and more convinced that I needed to express my convictions and my grave concerns. I think one of the things that pushed me over the top on feeling like this was a step I needed to take was that on the day that the children's names were read who had been killed in Newtown, Connecticut, legislation was submitted to allow guns on playgrounds. And I just felt like if I didn't stand up to that, when would I stand up? I mean, I just couldn't understand it. I still can't understand that. And guns allowed everywhere on campuses and in bars. But to have that, the guns would be allowed on playgrounds on the day that we were remembering the 6-month anniversary of that tragedy in Connecticut just struck me as being so mean-spirited that I just felt like people of faith had to stand up against that kind of expression representing our state.
But what did you do to get arrested?
Well, it doesn't take much. We believe that we're within our rights gathering in the legislative building. The North Carolina Constitution guarantees the right of citizens to gather to instruct the legislature. It does not guarantee the right of the legislature to instruct citizens. And so we believe that the state is acting unconstitutionally by arresting people who are gathering, hoping to be heard by our legislative leaders. But they have made this decision, and so when the police announce that people have to disperse, if you do not disperse, then they bind your hands behind your back and lead you into the basement of the Capitol building. My group, there were 94 of us, had to sit there for 3 hours, which was, I thought, onerous for some people. You can't, the way the ties are, you can't really lean back in a chair, so you had to sit perched on the edge of your chair for 3 hours until they finally put you in the paddy wagons to go to Wake detention. Once we were in the detention center, they processed us very quickly. They cut off the bonds, and they moved us right through, and they released me anyway, just on my own recognizance. So I found the police at Wake to be very professional and to move very quickly.
Reverend Edens, Dr. Edens, how can our listeners learn more about Moral Mondays in North Carolina?
Oh my goodness, there's so much now available. So you could go to the Moral Mondays. There's a Facebook page. You could simply Google it and go to the NAACP web page that describes it. If you wanted to, you could go to the Southern Conference United Church of Christ Moral Mondays, and they have their own Facebook page just for United Church of Christ people, which has been quite active. But I think the NAACP is probably the best source for information.
Reverend Dr. Jill Edens is co-pastor of the United Church of Chapel Hill. She's one of the many, many faith leaders who are participating in the Moral Mondays actions at the North Carolina State House. It is a kind of activity that celebrates Independence Day in the best possible way. Reverend Edens, thank you so much for being with us today on State of Belief Radio.
Thanks for having me.